My parents left me a broken cabin in Alaska. My sister got a $1.2 million mansion in Miami. My fiancé called me a pathetic loser and left me for her. In despair, I went to the cabin. Then I found something worth $500 million. I'm Sarah Martinez, and this is the story of how my life went from complete devastation to unimaginable triumph in the span of 6 months. It's also the story of the most satisfying revenge I never saw coming. It all started when my parents, Robert and Linda Martinez, died in a car accident last January. My father was a successful real estate developer who'd built a small empire across 3 states, while my mother came from old money, the kind that whispers about generational wealth at country club brunches. I always knew there would be an inheritance, but I never imagined how it would tear my family apart. The reading of the will was held at the law offices of Brennan and Associates in downtown Chicago. My sister Jessica and I sat across from each other in those uncomfortable leather chairs, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. We'd never been particularly close. She was the golden child, the one who married young to a hedge fund manager named Marcus, the one who always seemed to land on her feet no matter what. When the lawyer, Mr. Brennan, began reading, I felt my world crumble piece by piece. To my daughter Jessica Martinez Wellington, I leave the family mansion in Miami Beach, valued at approximately $1.2 million, along with all furnishings, artwork, and the BMW in the garage. Additionally, I leave her my stock portfolio, valued at approximately $800,000. Jessica didn't even try to hide her smirk. She'd always been Dad's favorite, and now she was being rewarded for it in the most concrete way possible. To my daughter Sarah Martinez, I leave the family cabin in Denali, Alaska, along with the surrounding 40 acres of land. That was it. No stock portfolio. No luxury car. No mention of the cabin's value because, frankly, there wasn't much to mention. I'd been to that cabin exactly 3 times in my life. It was a drafty, run-down structure that my grandfather had built in the 1940s as a hunting lodge. The last time I'd seen it, half the roof was caving in and the plumbing hadn't worked in a decade. But the worst was yet to come. After the reading, as we stood outside the law office, Jessica turned to me with that condescending smile she'd perfected over the years. "I'm sorry you didn't get more, Sarah. But honestly, what did you expect? You're 32, you work at a nonprofit making $35,000 a year, and you've never even been married. At least now you have somewhere to go when you can't afford rent in the city anymore." Her words stung, but not as much as what happened next. My fiancée, Rebecca Chen, who I'd been with for 3 years and had proposed to just 6 months earlier, was standing beside me through this whole ordeal. We'd met at a coffee shop where I was grading papers. I worked part-time as a tutor for underprivileged kids while also managing donor relations for a small environmental nonprofit. Rebecca was a successful marketing executive at a tech company, making 6 figures and climbing the corporate ladder fast. I thought she loved me for who I was, not what I had. I was wrong. As we walked to the parking garage, Rebecca suddenly stopped and turned to face me. "Sarah, we need to talk." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "What's wrong?" "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice cold and detached. "I thought you came from money. I thought there was security in our future. But seeing you get basically nothing while your sister gets everything. It's just shown me what kind of family you really come from." "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew where this was heading. "I mean you're a pathetic loser, Sarah. You're 32 years old with no real career, no money, no prospects. You can't even get your own family to respect you enough to leave you something worthwhile. I can't tie my future to someone so fundamentally unsuccessful." The words hit me like physical blows. "Rebecca, you can't be serious. We're engaged. We love each other." She pulled the engagement ring off her finger and held it out to me. "I'm going to dinner with Jessica tonight. She's invited me to stay at the Miami house for a few weeks while I figure things out. Maybe spend some time getting to know Marcus's single brother, David. He's a cardiologist." I stared at her in shock. "You're leaving me for my sister?" "I'm leaving you because you're going nowhere in life, and your sister represents everything you're not: successful, wealthy, sophisticated. She and I actually have a lot in common. We've been talking for months about how much potential I'm wasting with you." The betrayal was complete. Not only was my fiancée abandoning me in my moment of grief and financial devastation, but she was doing it for my sister, and apparently they'd been planning this for months. I watched Rebecca walk away, her heels clicking on the concrete as she headed toward Jessica's Mercedes. Jessica rolled down the window as Rebecca got in the passenger seat. "Don't feel too bad, Sarah," Jessica called out. "Maybe that cabin will be good for you. Some time alone in the wilderness might help you figure out what you're actually good at. If anything. They drove away, leaving me standing alone in the parking garage, holding my grandmother's engagement ring and wondering how my life had fallen apart so completely in the span of 2 hours. Over the next 2 weeks, I fell into a deep depression. I took leave from my job, barely left my apartment, and spent most of my time scrolling through social media, torturing myself with updates from Jessica and Rebecca. They were living it up in Miami, posting pictures of themselves at exclusive restaurants, yacht parties, and spa days. Rebecca had even started wearing designer clothes that she'd never been able to afford on her corporate salary. Clearly Jessica was bankrolling their new friendship. The comments on their photos made everything worse. "You two look like sisters. So glad you found each other. Rebecca, you're glowing. Jessica is such a good influence on you. Power women supporting power women. Love this friendship." Meanwhile, I was eating ramen noodles and trying to figure out how I was going to afford rent next month without Rebecca's half of the expenses. But it was a phone call from Jessica that finally pushed me to my breaking point. "Sarah, I have a proposition for you," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Rebecca and I have been talking, and we think it would be better for everyone if you just signed over your inheritance to me." "What are you talking about?" "The cabin is worthless, and you know it. It's just going to be a money pit of repairs and property taxes that you can't afford. But Marcus has connections in Alaska, mining companies, oil companies, people who might be interested in the land for development. If you sign it over to me, I'll give you $50,000 cash. That's probably more than that worthless property is worth anyway." $50,000 for 40 acres in Alaska? Sarah, be realistic. It's 40 acres of worthless wilderness with a falling down shack on it. You should be grateful I'm offering you anything. It's more money than you've ever had in your life. The condescension in her voice was unbearable. "I need time to think about it." "Well, don't think too long. Rebecca and I are planning to move in together. She's already given notice at her apartment. It would be nice to have this settled before then." She hung up, and I sat there staring at my phone, feeling more worthless and defeated than I ever had in my life. That night, I made a decision. I was going to Alaska. I didn't really have a plan. I just knew I couldn't stay in Chicago anymore, watching my sister and my ex-fiancé build a life together on social media while I fell apart in my studio apartment. Maybe Jessica was right, maybe some time alone in the wilderness would help me figure out what I was actually good at. I used most of my savings to buy a plane ticket to Fairbanks, then spend another chunk of money I didn't have on supplies, sleeping bag, camping gear, enough non-perishable food for a month, basic tools, and a generator. I figured if I was going to be miserable, I might as well be miserable somewhere that matched my mood. The flight to Alaska was the loneliest 5 hours of my life. I kept thinking about Rebecca, wondering if she was lying in Jessica's guest room, planning their future together. Wondering if she ever actually loved me, or if I'd just been a placeholder until something better came along. Landing in Fairbanks in early March was like stepping into another world. The cold hit me like a physical force, and the landscape was so vast and empty it made me feel even smaller and more insignificant than I already did. I rented a truck and drove the 3 hours to the property, following GPS coordinates and increasingly rough roads until I finally reached what my grandfather had optimistically called the Martinez family lodge. It was worse than I remembered. The cabin was a disaster. The roof had partially collapsed over the winter, there were holes in the walls that let in wind and snow, and the entire structure looked like it might fall down if I sneezed too hard. The 40 acres around it were beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, towering pine trees, distant mountains, and in silence so complete it was almost terrifying. I spent the first week just trying to make the cabin habitable. I cleared debris, patched holes with tarps and plywood I bought in the nearest town, 40 miles away, and set up the generator to power a space heater and some basic lights. It was backbreaking work, and I'd never felt so alone in my life, but something strange happened during that second week. As I worked on the cabin, cleaning out decades of neglect and mouse droppings, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in months: purpose. Every small improvement I made felt like a victory. Every problem I solved on my own built my confidence back up, piece by piece. I also started exploring the property. My grandfather's hunting lodge was situated on a hillside, and the 40 acres stretched down toward a small creek and back up into dense forest. On my daily walks, I began to notice things: unusual rock formations, strange discolorations in the soil, and most intriguingly, what looked like old mining equipment scattered in various locations. It was during my third week that I found the first clue. I was exploring the far eastern corner of the property, following what looked like an old trail, when I stumbled across the remains of what was clearly a mine shaft. It had been boarded up and covered with decades of vegetation, but the wood was rotting and some of the boards had fallen away, revealing a dark opening that descended into the hillside. My curiosity overrode my common sense. I went back to the cabin, grabbed a flashlight and some rope, and returned to investigate. The shaft went down about 20 feet before opening into a larger chamber. As I rappelled down with my makeshift equipment, my flashlight beam revealed something that made my heart stop. The walls of the chamber were streaked with veins of what looked like gold. I'm not a geologist, but I'd taken enough earth science classes to recognize gold or when I saw it. And this wasn't just traces, the veins were thick, numerous, and appeared to run deep into the mountain. I spent the rest of the day exploring the chamber and discovered it was just the tip of the iceberg. The mine extended much further than I could explore safely with my limited equipment, but everywhere I looked, I saw evidence of valuable mineral deposits that had been barely touched. That evening, I did some research on my laptop using my phone's hotspot. What I learned changed everything. The area around Denali had been the site of several gold rushes in the early 1900s, but my family's property had somehow been overlooked by the major mining operations. More importantly, modern geological surveys suggested that the entire region was sitting on top of one of the largest unmined gold deposits in North America. But it wasn't just gold. As I dug deeper into geological reports and mining industry publications, I learned that the specific area where my property was located was believed to contain significant deposits of rare earth elements, the minerals used in everything from smartphones to electric car batteries to solar panels. With the green energy revolution driving demand through the roof, these elements were worth more per pound than gold. I spent the next 2 weeks carefully exploring and documenting what I'd found. I took hundreds of photos, collected samples, and mapped out the extent of the visible deposits. The work was methodical and exhausting. I'd wake up at dawn, eat a quick breakfast of instant oatmeal and coffee heated on my camp stove, then spend 8 to 10 hours crawling through underground chambers with nothing but a headlamp and my grandfather's old mining tools that I'd found stored in a shed behind the cabin. The more I explored, the more extensive the mineral deposits appeared to be. The original shaft I discovered was just one of several entry points into what seemed to be a vast underground network. In some chambers, the gold veins were so thick I could scrape flakes off with my fingernail. In others, I found strange, rainbow-colored deposits that I couldn't identify but suspected might be the rare earth elements I'd been reading about. I also discovered evidence that my grandfather had known about at least some of the deposits. Hidden beneath decades of debris in the cabin's basement, I found a wooden box containing old maps, handwritten notes, and what appeared to be mineral samples wrapped in newspaper from the 1940s. One note, written in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting, simply said, "Too much for one man. Save for the girls when they're older." It broke my heart to realize that he'd planned to share this discovery with Jessica and me someday, but had died before he could tell us about it. If our parents had known, they never would have treated the cabin as a worthless consolation prize. The isolation during those weeks was both challenging and healing. For the first time in months, I wasn't checking social media obsessively or torturing myself with thoughts of Rebecca and Jessica living their best lives in Miami. Instead, I was completely focused on something that was mine, my work, my discovery, my future. I started sleeping better than I had since before my parents died, and I began to feel a sense of purpose that I'd never experienced in my previous life of tutoring and nonprofit work. But the real breakthrough came when I found my grandfather's journal, hidden behind a loose board in the cabin's only closet. The entries, dating from 1943 to 1947, told the story of a man who'd discovered something extraordinary but had been forced to keep it secret due to wartime regulations and lack of resources to properly develop the claims. "The government men came again today," read one entry from 1944. "They say all mineral extraction must go to the war effort, but they want to pay pennies on the dollar. Better to wait this out and let the girls inherit something worthwhile when they're grown." Another entry, from 1946, revealed that he'd been approached multiple times by mining companies who'd somehow learned about his discovery. 3 different outfits have come sniffing around this month. Word is getting out somehow. May need to file formal claims soon to protect what's here for Robert's daughters. The final entry, from just weeks before his death in 1947, was the most telling. "Talked to Robert about the mine today. Told him it's worth more than anything he'll ever develop in real estate, but he doesn't believe me. Thinks I'm just an old prospector chasing fairy tales. Maybe the girls will understand someday. Left everything documented in the safe deposit box at First National in Fairbanks, key hidden in the cabin." A safe deposit box. There were more documents. Then I drove to Fairbanks and visited the office of a geological survey company, but not before making a stop at First National Bank. It took some convincing and a lot of paperwork to prove my identity and inheritance, but eventually I gained access to my grandfather's safe deposit box, which contained detailed geological surveys from the 1940s, mineral assay reports, and formal mining claims that had never been filed. The geologist, Dr. Amanda Foster, agreed to analyze my samples and visit the property for a full survey. When I showed her my grandfather's original surveys and assay reports, her eyes went wide. "Sarah, these are incredibly detailed for the 1940s. Your grandfather was far more knowledgeable about geology than most prospectors of his era. If these numbers are accurate, you're sitting on one of the most significant mineral discoveries in Alaska's history." A week later, she called me with results that literally made me dizzy. "Sarah, I need you to sit down," she said. "What you found is extraordinary. The gold deposits alone are worth approximately $50 million, but that's not even the valuable part. The rare earth element concentrations in your samples are off the charts. Conservative estimates put the total value of extractable minerals on your property at $500 million. Possibly more." I had to ask her to repeat that 3 times before it sank in. $500 million. My worthless inheritance was worth $500 million. But Dr. Foster had more news. "Sarah, I have to ask, has anyone else approached you about this property? Because according to my research, there have been several mining companies trying to acquire land in this exact area for the past 2 years. Someone knows what's down there." A chill ran down my spine as I remembered Jessica's phone call. Marcus has connections in Alaska. Mining companies who might be interested in the land for development. They knew. Jessica and Rebecca weren't just being cruel when they tried to convince me to sell, they were trying to steal $500 million from me. That night, I called a lawyer in Anchorage who specialized in mining rights and property law. Sarah Williams was a tough, no-nonsense attorney who'd built her career protecting small property owners from being taken advantage of by large corporations. "You need to move fast," she told me after I explained the situation. "If word gets out about what you found before you've secured all the proper permits and mining rights, you're going to have companies coming out of the woodwork trying to find ways to take this away from you. The good news is that you own the land outright, which gives you strong legal position. The bad news is that your sister and her husband probably have lawyers and connections who'll try to challenge your inheritance or find some other angle." Over the next month, working with Sarah Williams and Dr. Foster, I quietly secured mining rights to my property and began the process of setting up the legal framework to develop the mineral rights. We also arranged for several major mining companies to bid on extraction contracts, which would allow me to profit from the resources without having to finance the actual mining operation myself. Meanwhile, I watched Jessica and Rebecca's social media accounts with new eyes. They were living their best life in Miami, completely unaware that they just tried to scam me out of $500 million. Rebecca had moved in with Jessica permanently and was posting about their sister-like bond and their plans to start a business together. The comments were still full of people praising their friendship and Jessica's generosity in taking Rebecca in after her breakup. But I also noticed something else in their photos. Marcus was frequently absent, and when he did appear, he looked unhappy. In one particularly telling photo, Jessica and Rebecca were laughing and holding cocktails while Marcus sat in the background, checking his phone with an expression that suggested he was not enjoying their new living arrangement. It was time for the first phase of my revenge. I started by creating a new Instagram account under a fake name and began following Jessica, Rebecca, and Marcus. I also reached out to some mutual friends from Chicago, carefully asking casual questions about how Jessica and Rebecca were doing, whether they were happy, that sort of thing. What I learned was very interesting. According to my friend Kate, who'd stayed in touch with Marcus's sister, the Miami situation was not going as smoothly as social media suggested. Rebecca had apparently become very demanding, expecting Jessica to bankroll an increasingly expensive lifestyle. More problematically, she'd been openly flirting with Marcus, which was causing serious tension in Jessica's marriage. "Marcus is getting really tired of having Rebecca around," Kate told me during a phone call. "She acts like she's part of the family now, and Jessica just goes along with it because she likes having someone around who thinks she's amazing. But Marcus feels like he can't relax in his own house." This was better than I could have hoped for. I decided to accelerate their problems. Using my fake Instagram account, I started leaving carefully crafted comments on Rebecca's photos. Nothing too obvious, just subtle things that would make Jessica jealous and suspicious. On a photo of Rebecca wearing a designer dress, "Marcus has amazing taste. He picked that out perfectly for you. On a photo of Rebecca at an expensive restaurant, so sweet of Marcus to take you somewhere so romantic. On a photo of Rebecca and Jessica together, you and Marcus make such a cute couple. Wait, is that Jessica in the background? I made sure to like every photo that showed Rebecca looking particularly attractive or happy, and I started following several of Marcus's friends and business associates, making it look like I was someone in their social circle who knew something about Rebecca and Marcus spending time together. Within 2 weeks, Jessica's posts became noticeably more possessive. She started posting more photos of herself and Marcus together, with captions like "date night with my husband and so grateful for my man." The photos of her and Rebecca became less frequent, and when Rebecca did appear, Jessica made sure she was positioned prominently between Rebecca and Marcus. But the real genius was in the comments I left on Marcus's business page. I created a fake LinkedIn account for a fictional mining consultant and left a professional comment on one of Marcus's posts about investment opportunities. "Have you moved forward with the Alaska project yet? Last we spoke, you seemed very confident about the mineral rights acquisition. Hope the family connection worked out for you." Then I waited. It took exactly 4 days for Jessica to call me. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight with stress. "I'm flying to Chicago tomorrow. Meet me for coffee." "I'm actually not in Chicago right now, Jessica. I'm in Alaska, at the cabin." There was a pause. "What are you doing there?" "Thinking about your offer. 50,000 seemed pretty generous for worthless wilderness, so I wanted to take one last look at the property before I sign it over to you." "Have you made a decision?" I could hear the tension in her voice. She was worried, which meant my LinkedIn comment had hit its mark. "I'm still thinking. But I'm curious, how did Marcus know to look into mining companies for this land? It's pretty remote and undeveloped." Another pause, longer this time. "He just has connections in various industries. He thought there might be some development potential." "That's interesting. I met with a geologist last week, just out of curiosity. She said there have been companies trying to acquire land in this area for years. Almost like they know something specific about what's here." I could practically hear Jessica's mind racing through the phone. "Sarah, whatever you're thinking, you need to be realistic. That land isn't worth anything significant. If there was valuable minerals there, don't you think Grandpa would have found them?" "Maybe. Or maybe he just didn't know what to look for. Technology has come a long way since the 1940s. Look, I'm going to increase my offer. 75,000, cash, and I'll even pay the transfer fees. But I need an answer soon. Marcus has investors lined up, and they're not going to wait forever." Investors lined up. That confirmed everything I needed to know. "Let me think about it, Jessica. I'll call you in a few days." After I hung up, I immediately called Sarah Williams. "It's time to accelerate our timeline. I think they're planning to move against me soon." She agreed. "I'll have all the paperwork finalized by tomorrow. Once you sign the mining contracts, the value of your property will be public record, and they'll know what they missed out on." The next phase of my plan was more elaborate. I hired a private investigator in Miami to do some digging into Marcus's business dealings and Jessica's finances. What we found was fascinating. Marcus's hedge fund had been underperforming for the past year, and he'd been making increasingly risky investments to try to make up for losses. More importantly, he'd been borrowing against their house and Jessica's trust fund to finance speculative deals, including what appeared to be preliminary payments to several mining companies for consultation services related to Alaska properties. They weren't just planning to scam me, they were already spending money they expected to steal from me. But the private investigator also uncovered something else interesting. Rebecca's departure from her marketing job hadn't been voluntary. She'd been fired for falsifying client reports and had been secretly looking for work for months while living off Jessica's generosity. Her confidence and success had been a facade that was crumbling. It was time to bring everything into the open. I called Dr. Foster and asked her to prepare a comprehensive geological report on my property. Then I contacted 3 major mining companies and arranged for competitive bids on extraction rights. Finally, I had Sarah Williams draft a press release announcing the discovery of significant mineral deposits on private land near Denali. The press release went out on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing nonstop. Jessica called first. "Sarah, what the hell is going on? I'm seeing news reports about a major mineral discovery near Denali. Please tell me this isn't your property." "Actually, it is my property," I said calmly. Turns out that worthless cabin was sitting on top of about $500 million worth of gold and rare earth elements. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought she'd hung up. 500 million? She finally whispered. Conservative estimate. Could be more once full extraction begins. The mining companies are very excited. But that's impossible. Marcus's people surveyed that area. They said there was nothing valuable there. I think Marcus's people lied to him. Or maybe he lied to you. Either way, I'm pretty sure he was planning to buy my land for almost nothing and then sell the mining rights for a massive profit. Another long silence. Then, Sarah, we're family. We should share this. It's not fair that you get everything while I'm going to stop you right there, I interrupted. 3 months ago, you told me I was pathetic and worthless. You convinced my fiancé to leave me because I wasn't successful enough. You tried to buy my inheritance for a fraction of its worth. And now you want to talk about family and fairness? I was upset about Dad's will. I said things I didn't mean. You meant every word, Jessica. And so did Rebecca. But don't worry, I'm planning to share my good fortune with both of you. What do you mean? You'll see. I hung up and immediately called Marcus. Marcus, this is Sarah Martinez. I believe you've been trying to acquire my property in Alaska. Sarah, hi, he said, and I could hear the panic in his voice. I want you to know that any conversations Jessica and I had about your property were just casual speculation. We had no intention of trying to take advantage of you. That's interesting, because I have records of payments from your business accounts to several mining companies for consultation services related to properties in my exact area. I also have a LinkedIn comment from one of your associates referring to your Alaska project and your confidence about mineral rights acquisition through a family connection. He was quiet for a long moment. Look, if there's been a misunderstanding, there's been no misunderstanding, Marcus. You and Jessica knew there was valuable minerals on my land, and you tried to manipulate me into selling it for almost nothing while I was grieving and financially desperate. That's not a misunderstanding, that's fraud. What do you want? He asked. Justice, I said, and hung up. But Marcus wasn't my primary target. Rebecca was. I called her that evening. Sarah? Why are you calling me? She sounded genuinely surprised to hear from me. I wanted to thank you, actually. Thank me for what? For showing me exactly what kind of person you really are before we got married. Can you imagine how messy our divorce would have been after you found out about my $500 million? I could hear her sharp intake of breath. You're what? Oh, you haven't heard? The cabin you called worthless? It's sitting on top of the largest unmined rare earth deposit in North America. I'm going to be very, very rich, Rebecca. The silence stretched out so long I started to worry she'd fainted. $500 million? She finally whispered. Conservative estimate. The mining contracts I signed today guarantee me at least that much over the next 10 years, with significant upside potential if market prices continue to rise. But Jessica said the land was worthless. She said you were stupid to even consider keeping it. Jessica lied to you. She and Marcus knew about the mineral deposits all along. They were planning to steal my inheritance and cut you out of the profits entirely. You were just a useful tool to make me feel so worthless that I'd sell my land for almost nothing. I could hear Rebecca starting to cry. That's not true. Jessica is my friend. She cares about me. Rebecca, Marcus has been paying mining companies to survey my property for over a year. Jessica offered me $50,000 for land worth $500 million. They were planning to make hundreds of millions of dollars and never tell you about it. You were their pawn, not their partner. No, that's not. Jessica wouldn't do that to me. Ask her, I said. Ask her right now if she knew about the mineral surveys. Ask her why Marcus was so interested in buying my land specifically. Ask her why she was so eager to get me to sell it quickly. I hung up and sat back to wait. It didn't take long. According to my private investigator, who'd been monitoring social media and public records, the Miami house erupted in drama that very evening. Neighbors reported shouting and crying that lasted well past midnight. The next morning, Rebecca posted a cryptic message on Instagram, "Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who betray you worst." By that afternoon, she'd moved out. But I wasn't done yet. I'd spent months feeling worthless, watching Jessica and Rebecca parade their friendship on social media while I fell apart in my studio apartment. It was time for the world to see who these people really were. I created a detailed blog post titled How My Sister and My Ex-Fiancé Tried to Steal $500 million from Me and posted it on Medium, Reddit, and several other platforms. I included screenshots of text messages, social media posts, and even some of the fake Instagram comments I'd left to expose their relationship drama. I also included photos of my property, the geological reports, and documentation of Marcus's payments to mining companies. The story went viral within hours. BuzzFeed picked it up first, then several major news outlets ran versions of the story. The comment sections were filled with people expressing outrage at Jessica and Rebecca's behavior and celebrating my vindication. Someone even created a hashtag #AlaskaJustice. But the real satisfaction came from watching Jessica and Rebecca's social media accounts. Jessica made her Instagram private within hours of my story going viral, but not before the comments section of her last public post was flooded with people calling her out for trying to defraud her own sister. Someone had also posted screenshots of our text message conversations, showing her offering me $75,000 for land worth $500 million. Rebecca's account was even more dramatic. She posted a long, rambling statement about how she'd been manipulated by people she trusted and was seeking legal advice about her situation. The comments were brutal, hundreds of people pointing out that she'd abandoned her fiancé at the reading of her parents' will and calling her a gold digger who got what she deserved. Marcus tried to do damage control by posting a statement on LinkedIn claiming that any survey work his company had done was preliminary research unrelated to any specific acquisition plans, but someone had found and shared the LinkedIn comment I'd left, making it clear he'd been planning to exploit his family connection to me for financial gain. Within a week, their perfect Miami life had completely imploded. Jessica called me one last time. "Sarah, you've destroyed my marriage, my reputation, and Rebecca's life. Are you happy now?" "I'm getting there," I said. "But I'm not finished yet." "What more could you possibly want?" "I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything, Jessica. The way I felt when I left that lawyer's office thinking I'd inherited nothing while you got millions. The way I felt when my fiancé called me a pathetic loser and left me for you. The way I felt when you tried to manipulate me into selling my birthright for practically nothing. I never meant for things to go this far." "Yes, you did. You meant every single word, every cruel comment, every manipulative phone call. You were perfectly willing to watch me suffer as long as it benefited you. So what happens now? Now you get to experience what I experienced. You get to feel worthless and humiliated and alone. You get to wonder if anyone will ever love you for who you really are, or if they're just waiting for someone better to come along." There was a long pause. When Jessica spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm truly sorry for everything." "I know you are," I said. "Now you are. But apologies don't undo the damage, do they?" 18 months later, I'm writing this from my new house in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It's a beautiful place with mountain views and enough privacy that I don't have to worry about people recognizing me from the viral story. The environmental impact studies for my Alaska property are still ongoing, and while the full mining operations won't begin for another year or two, I've already received substantial payments from mining companies for preliminary extraction rights and geological access. My lawyers estimate that my total earnings over the next 2 decades could exceed $1 billion if market conditions remain favorable. Jessica and Marcus got divorced after it came out that he'd been hiding significant debts from her and had used her trust fund money to finance his failed Alaska scheme. She moved back to Chicago and is apparently working as a real estate agent for the firm that used to compete with our father's company. From what I hear, she's struggling financially and socially. Turns out that when your reputation is built on being rich and successful, losing both makes you lose most of your friends too. Rebecca tried to contact me several times through mutual friends, apparently wanting to apologize and make amends. I never responded. She eventually moved back to her hometown in Wisconsin and is working for a small marketing firm. Her LinkedIn shows she's been at the job for 3 months, which is longer than she lasted anywhere else after getting fired from her previous position. Marcus filed for bankruptcy and lost his hedge fund license. Last I heard, he was working as a financial advisor at a small firm in Orlando, making a fraction of what he used to earn. I wish I could say I felt bad for them, but I don't. What I do feel is grateful. Grateful that Rebecca showed me who she really was before we got married. Grateful that Jessica's greed and cruelty motivated me to actually visit my inheritance instead of just signing it away. Grateful that their betrayal led me to the discovery that changed my life. I've also learned something important about myself. I'm not the pathetic, worthless person they made me feel like I was. I'm someone who can survive betrayal, rebuild from nothing, and create success on my own terms. I'm someone who can be alone without being lonely, who can find purpose in hard work and satisfaction in justice served. Sometimes the best revenge isn't something you plan, it's something you stumble into by refusing to let other people's cruelty define your worth. And sometimes, when people show you exactly who they are, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is believe them and walk away. Even if you have to walk all the way to Alaska to do it.